Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you're joining us from. It's 3 p.m. here in the UK and it's 10 a.m. Eastern time, and you're all most welcome to join us here at 0 Days Live. Now, today, of course, is Wednesday, and so we will be serializing our Security Begins Here format, where we speak to a range of Chief Information Security Officers and also business leaders to understand the challenges that they see in the world of cyber. Today, we'll be welcoming to the virtual studios Becky Pinkard, who is Chief Information Security Officer at Aldermore Bank. But first, just a quick recap of yesterday's show, where we were lucky enough to be joined by Jim Reeves, Managing Director of Razorthorn, to talk about the dynamic range of online payment systems, the associated security challenges and compliance considerations that all organizations must understand in order to successfully, securely, and legitimately take online payments. It was a subject that many could relate to, especially in the current situation, and the implications of good or bad implementation of such services is something that could easily be felt far and wide by everyone. So we did appreciate his insights on the steps organizations should and could take. Now, if you did miss that or any of the other live shows, do catch it on our on-demand service, which can be found at nominetcyber.com/0dayslive. Now, of course, later in the week, we are joined by a host of other special guests. We've got John Banghart, Senior Director of Cybersecurity Services at Venable tomorrow, where we'll be discussing the impact of encryption protocols on network visibility from a government perspective. And on Friday, we'll close the week with our Fun Friday segment. So it's a light-hearted look back at the week's news. We'll be joined by special guest Alex Scroxton from Computer Weekly as we celebrate May Day. So do make sure you tune in then too. As usual, a welcome from me to you. I'm Stuart Reed. I'm with Nominet, focused on cyber solutions. As usual, I'm in the chair to welcome our special guests each and every day of our live shows. Just a quick reminder about Nominet. We are primarily known for being responsible for managing the .uk domain, which we've been doing so for over 23 years now, with something in the order of 15 million domains currently under management. And building on this strong heritage of understanding the importance of domain names for network connectivity, we also provide cybersecurity solutions to protect both government and enterprise networks worldwide from cyber attacks, including providing service to the UK government's National Cybersecurity Centre. Ensuring people are able to be connected, included and secure is at the heart of what we do at Nominet. And that is arguably more important now than ever before. And with that in mind, we wanted to bring you an interactive show to bridge the gap left behind by the lack of physical meetings taking place and bring you 0 Days Live for everyone with an interest in or from within cybersecurity community. Now, I'm joined here, both front of house and behind the scenes, by a highly capable team, making sure everything runs just the way it should. And if it doesn't, getting it back on track as quickly as we can. And speaking of tracks, this week's burning question, as you're probably all familiar with now, is what is your favorite isolation tune and why? So please do let us know. Today, I've got a different one. It is now the middle of the week, so I'm going with Virtual Insanity by Jamiroquai, because whilst all of this tech is here to keep us connected, and that's doing a great job, it does remind us that we should, where we can, take a break. And speaking of taking a break, something Steve does quite a lot on this show. So Steve, are you with us today?
I am here today. And yes, I'm here and present, so thanks for pointing out my frequent absence.
That's all right. It's noted by our regular viewers as well as us here at 0 Days Live. What's your isolation tune today, Steve, and why?
Talking of breaks then, I'm going with Queen, I Want to Break Free, because sometimes that's what I feel like I need to do. And quite often I do, just get on my bike and break free for my exercise for an hour or so. So that's my my tune of the week.
Excellent, good choice. Now, this show really isn't the same without all of you tuning in at home as well, and we're delighted to welcome both our regulars and also new audience members each and every day of the week as we build an accessible community to bring people together, hear from others in the industry, get a roundup of what's going on in the news, share some thoughts on best practice, and of course, interject some good humour along the way. With that in mind, we do cover a lot of important subjects, but we don't want to take ourselves too seriously here. As a quick reminder, Each of our 30-minute or so shows is absolutely live each and every day. And as such, there is bound to be some mild blips along the way. But when they do happen, we hope you agree it's just part of the fun and games of the show. And please do, as I said before, get involved. If during today's show or any of the other live shows that you join, you want to ask a question or give comment, please do so using the console on your screen, and Kerry will read them out during today's webcast. And speaking of Kerry, where are you today?
Hi, Stuart. I'm here in my conservatory.
Excellent, good, just like every day on Zero Days Live. Great to have you here with us. What is your favourite isolation tune and why today, Kerry?
Well, before I tell you mine, I'd like to thank Clive, who has written in on the chat already to say, please don't stand too close to me. And he likes to play that in the supermarket queues.
Excellent, thank you for that, Clive. So how do you top that one, Kerry?
Well, I'm going to struggle, but as you know, I've been theming mine as per the day of the week. And today we are focused on Security Begins Here, which to me is really thinking about challenges and the challenges that CISOs face and have to deal with. So with a really tenuous link, I've gone for challenges and then Cinderella Man by Eminem, because that is a song that really gets me to get up and moving and go out and do some exercise, which is a big challenge for me.
Okay, good. Well, thank you for sharing us your thought process to arrive at that one as well. That's been insightful for all of us. And again, everyone joining in, please do let us know what your tunes are and we'll read them out. Simply do type any questions that you have or any comments in terms of what your isolation tune might be today, and let us know, and we can read them out during the show. Oh, and also, while I remember, we would like to do a compilation of clips to share across the World Wide Web of what our listeners or viewers like about the show. So please do be creative as you like. We do need your input. So simply take a 5-second or so clip on your smartphone of yourself. Tell us what you like about the show and send it to marketing@nominetcyber.com. And we're going to compile all of those together and we'll let you know when they go live. Now, as I mentioned before, we are serializing our Security Begins Here initiative, and today we'll be meeting Becky Pinkard, who is Chief Information Security Officer at Aldermore Bank. But before we do welcome her into the virtual studios, this is what happened when we met her earlier.
We have to make sure that we're taking appropriate care and due diligence around where data is stored, how we access it, etc. So it's being able to come into a role and say, what must we spend, what should we spend, and then what is maybe nice to have spent. I think you have to pick and choose where you spend your stress and where you delegate then, different types of stresses.
Excellent. Well, without further ado, I would like to welcome to our virtual studios Becky Pinkard, who's from Aldermore Bank. So thank you very much for joining us, Becky. How are you today?
I'm good, Stuart. Yeah, thanks for having me. I think I've got the camera working properly there, so hopefully that's...
Absolutely. Well, certainly from my perspective, I can see you and hear you just fine. Thank you very much. So hopefully all of our viewers can as well. Thank you very much for joining us today. Really insightful video. Of course, there is a longer form video of that available at Nominet Cyber as well for anyone to pick up on demand as well. But I'd like to pick up on a couple of those questions or the couple of comments rather that you made during that intro piece there, if I may. But before I do, of course, we ask all of our special guests every week a very important burning question. This one this week is, what is your favorite isolation tune and why? Easy for me to say, as regular viewers of the show will note is not true. But you've heard ours, Becky. What's yours?
I have to say I had a bit of debate about this because I'm sort of torn. It feels like sometimes on any given day. I think for today, I actually woke up with this stuck in my head. So I'll go with Ooh Child by the 5 Stair Steps, which is quite an oldie but a goodie. I might give away a bit of my age if you go and Google that one if you're not familiar with it. But then, like I said, I also sometimes throughout the day feel a little bit of the old We're Not Going to Take It by Twisted Sister. So again, showing a bit of age with that bad boy. But yeah, so I think it's a bit up and down depending on how it's going day to day.
Well, you gave us 2 for the price of 1 there, so thank you very much. And if I may, just for the benefit of everyone that's tuning in, can I get just a brief overview of both Aldermore Bank and your role within it?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So Aldermore Bank itself is about a 10-year-old bank here in the UK. We are owned by First Rand, which is a South African bank. And we basically operate and provide a range of different types of services from specialist mortgages. We do savings accounts. We do business finance solution, things like invoice assistance and things like that. So yeah, a smaller bank within the UK environment, but one that meets a lot of needs of customers in unique ways.
Excellent, thank you for that, Becky. Now, going back to some of the points you made in the video that we saw just a few moments ago, I think it's something really quite interesting that you mentioned is about figuring out from a security perspective what you must spend, what you should spend, and what would be nice to spend. So how do you approach figuring out which activity fits into which of those buckets?
No, it's a great question, and it's something that is always a challenge in any given organization. And the reason I say that is because it varies organization by organization. I have found in my career to date, you have to really look at the priorities of the company that you're working for. You have to understand the risk. Well, a lot of people say risk appetite. There's something else called risk attitude that I refer to quite frequently, and you have to understand, what is that attitude? What is the sort of capacity for risk from the board through the executive chain on down? And then you have to balance those priorities against that risk attitude in order to help make those decisions for funding and prioritization.
Okay, thank you. And we also asked you previously about how you build confidence in cyber defense. So what would your top tip be for encouraging a more secure culture within an organization?
I'd love to say it's something super glamorous and ultra techy, but it really isn't. At the end of the day, I think the best way to build a sense of confidence across an organization is sort of a twofold approach, and it has to do really with communicating across the organization. So it's down to working closely with whatever comms team or capability you have, and then in conjunction, not being afraid to present the face of security to the business. So you have to put yourself out there. You have to be available for questions. You have to be available, for the hard questions and the easy questions. You have to make time to go and attend people's SLTs and give them updates and talk about strategy and latest attacks and, literally just answer a multitude of questions. Everything from, I've had people ask me how, certain parts of their iPhones work. But I think just by being there and taking the time, you build this sort of friendly face of security that encourages people to understand how we exist to enable the business. And for me, that's been one of the best ways of then getting that confidence back from the business about what you're doing with regards to security.
And it seems that actually what you're picking out there is the role of a CISO or Chief Information Security Officer is quite an immersive one. It touches a lot of different facets within the organization, lot of places in terms of embedding itself. We, as you're probably aware, did some research recently around CISO stress. And one of the things that came out from that is there's potentially still a bit of a disconnect between the activities that a CISO does and what the rest of the board has a level of insight or responsibility for. How do you go about gaining trust from the business that your approach that you're putting forward is the right one?
That's interesting because it's something that I've been actively working on. So I always joke back to my boss. He's the co at our organization, a fantastic man, absolute great leader. But I always joke back to him. I say, you know, you hired me because apparently I put forward the right amount of trust, the right amount of confidence, the right amount of, you know, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm here to get the job done. I said, and that's great, and I appreciate that support. I said, but what I really want to do is, as I put together the program and as we continue to work together, I want to present and provide the bank with an understanding that the decisions that I'm making are mapped against something that's globally recognized, agreed upon as a great standard or framework, and is something that we can call upon and really use to solidify and roadmap ourselves against. And so for me, that boils down to picking a framework that works. And again, whether that's a NIST framework, whether that's, you know, any of the multitude of frameworks that are out there, but it's picking one of those, trying to find something that works for you in the current place that you're at with the current maturity of the organization, mapping your controls into that to understand, you know, where you're doing great, where you've got gaps, and then again, agreeing, working with your business, what is the best course of action to reach what steps, and helping them to understand it's not a light switch, right? There's no magic, but boop, security on, you know, it doesn't work like that. And I think bringing all of that together then helps to, again, center and build confidence around the fact that, you know, you're there to do the best job possible and in the right way.
And again, touching on the kind of the CISO stress report that Nominate conducted earlier in the year, and that kind of potential or at least perceived gap between the CISO and the board, do you think, in your experience, that senior leadership teams and boards do give enough support to the CISOs?
Yeah, it's another great question. I think it really depends, right? So I think it obviously is highly dependent upon the type of business and the type of, you know, leaders that you have in those roles. Different individuals' appetite for dealing with their own either comfort or discomfort over the subject of security then lend into how well they deal with and interact with and relate to security concerns and questions. So yeah, I think it's, you know, I always joke that one of the worst and best answers in security is it depends, but I think that answer applies in this situation.
Excellent, thank you. And you might have noticed, and all our viewers will also have noticed, that Steve has popped up on screen, which usually means he's got something insightful to say or he has a question by raising his virtual hand out there to us. So raising his virtual hand can only mean that he has got questions. What have you got, Steve?
I do have a question, Stuart. Thank you. Hi, Becky. We often talk a lot about security being the responsibility of everyone in the, you know, everyone in the organisation and adopting a culture around kind of security. But do you think that CISOs are too often held solely responsible for things like data breaches? You know, are they the main area of focus when something happens?
Yeah. It's such a difficult question, really, because I think that CISOs definitely own a large degree of responsibility for that, simply because, you know, we are supposed to sort of be at the helm asking the right questions. But I also think in organizations where you have a CDO or DPO, you know, you need to have that joint responsibility there. And especially when it boils down to understanding and protecting the data, you know, that's near and dear to the organization. I'd love to say that there's a right or wrong answer to, you know, who is the sole individual responsible for any given data breach. I don't think that's practical. I'm not sure, and maybe it's because I am a CISO. Maybe people aren't CISOs are like, well, yeah, duh, of course it's the CISO, you moron. But yeah, I'd like to think, being the person in the hot seat, I'd like to think that that there's a few more, you know, sort of hands responsible for helping.
Yeah, that makes sense. And from your perspective, what's the biggest trend that you're seeing for CISOs right now, or threat?
I think I'm going to have to say it's again quite boring. There's nothing exciting about security. I don't know why I keep saying it's quite boring. There's nothing. People always talk about, oh, security, that's so exciting. I'm like, dude, it's not NCIS 24/7, right? We're not all Matrix up in here, you know, pulling out our guns and popping into costumes and stuff. It quite frankly is pretty boring on a day-to-day basis. But I think whenever you start to dig into, I just completely blanked on your question now.
Just what are the biggest trends that you're seeing from CISO's perspective?
I got myself sidetracked. I started thinking about The Matrix. I was like, God, I love that movie.
To be fair, it's easily done because I found myself wandering in that direction as well, Becky. So
Yeah. I was just trying to think, what streaming service is it on? What can I watch tonight?
It's my own fault. Keanu Reeves is just too good in that movie, the only movie. But yeah, I think with regard to what I started to say and why I went down the whole not sexy route is because I think it's still down to things like phishing, ransomware, understanding whether or not if and when we get attacked. And then it's not even if anymore, is it? It's when, which is why we see cyber resilience becoming such a big thing from the regulators. When we get attacked and with what kind of, ransomware, destructiveware, whatever it might be, are we capable of recovering? And I think we're going to continue to see that be a trend and at the forefront of CISOs' minds and security organizations' minds as we go forward.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Becky. And actually, just wanted to touch on a point there because you mentioned that some of these kind of basics that we keep coming back to time and again on this show. Actually, the kind of the phishing, the ransomware stuff. It's stuff that's still hitting the headlines, but it's relatively speaking, it's not kind of the new bold stuff. It's established methods. So I guess with that in mind, what's the investment priority, do you think, for CISOs in 2020?
I think the investment priority is, unless you're an organization that is at the top of your game, I think the investment priority should still be centered around the basics. You need to make sure that you're taking care of security awareness training, that you're mapping that into, inbound email controls, outbound or egress, web-based controls, filtering controls where you can around things like data loss, data leakage capabilities. And then again, incorporating all of that into old school basis, like, doing the right kind of patching. Are you patching applications? Are you patching, the necessary operating systems? And again, none of those things are super awesome or amazing in terms of complexity or tech, but those are the things that get the basics covered off. I'd love to say that we're all being targeted by nation states with AI and, quantum computing goodness and, microbots dropping, little, USB sticks full of craziness here, but that's just not happening. That's not what we're being hit with. The true threat that we face is literally the day-to-day pounding at that front wall that says, hey, here's an email that's interesting. Click this, click this, click this, click this. That's the stuff that we're getting hounded with.
Excellent. Well, that's really useful insight for us as well, and I think for the viewers as well. It really does underline some of the things that we've been saying with other guests on this show around getting that kind of fundamental basic building blocks right as part of the cyber hygiene. So thank you for that. Kerry, I would imagine that we have got some comments and questions from the audience. What's first on the list?
Yeah, we absolutely do. We've got some good ones. So Becky, you talked about building the friendly face of the security team, but how can we do that in this remote era? And that's from Raj.
No, that's a great question. I think first of all, turn on your cameras when you're talking to people. I'm sitting obviously now on video calls all day, every day, and I tell you what, nothing makes me happier than not having the camera on. I mean, if you have ever seen a face built for radio, my friends, this is it right here. Yeah. But I think the biggest way that we can help each other is get the cameras on. Don't be afraid to send the smiles across the airwaves, right, such as it is right now. Don't be afraid to reach out and ask people and say, hey, just thinking about you, do you have any questions, anything I can help with? Reach out to those managers, reach out to those division owners and say, I haven't been in front of you in your SLT. I haven't been in front of you in your heads of lately. Could I come and do just a quick update? If you got any questions around our COVID-19 response, you have any concerns over new processes or ways of working, that you're collating and changing. But it is down to us to do that outreach. If there's one thing I've seen, and I can assure you won't happen, is people aren't going to come knocking on our door, going, hey, I'd really love for you to bore me with some more of that security stuff you got going on. That's cool stuff. I love drinking that Kool-Aid. We got to make it exciting. We got to smile. We got to work on getting in front of people.
Brilliant. That's great advice. Thank you. And then we have one in from Alan, who says, having been in the federal sector and working as a vendor, what's so different now about being a CISO?
In the federal sector? Is he talking about him or me? Because I've not been in the federal sector.
He said you, but
obviously misinformation there. But I guess the inference is the same in terms of, you know, how are you finding things from a kind of a different perspective, being a CISO of perhaps what could be classed as a critical national infrastructure organisation.
Definitely, yeah, we definitely have a large regulatory influence, of course. It's fascinating for me because I've spent my whole career in security. Prior to joining the bank, I sort of took a bit of a sidestep and went and joined a startup, a company called Digital Shadows, and they were still security focused. They're a threat intelligence company for anybody that doesn't know them, and it was interesting to me, right? Because there I went and learned about business development and product development. I ran and grew and owned the customer service team. I did their intelligence operations globally. So that was fascinating. But then over time, I was like, man, I miss security. Yeah, I need to get back into it. And so then stepping back into security, but then stepping into the CISO role, that was so interesting to me because the CISO role is, number one, got a completely different look on it than any other role I've ever been in. Immediately, everyone looks at you and is like, oh, that's the CISO. Don't tell Becky that, she's the CISO. I've had people actually, they're like, we're told we shouldn't tell you this. And I was like, no, tell me now, you know. And so then there's this sort of thought process that like, oh, if it goes to the CISO, that's bad stuff. You know, we don't want the CISO to know about it, that I sort of discovered. But then on the flip side, there's this other opportunity to do all of that conversation with people. So because you are the CISO, people are like, hey, they should know everything. They need to get up and help us know more about security as well. So it's this sort of kind of interesting place to sit. You know, you wear lots of different hats, and for me personally anyway, I had to really develop the confidence over the course of my career to feel comfortable getting into this role. So hopefully that helps to answer the question a bit.
That's great, thank you. And we have one from Harrison. Says, how does a small bank manage to compete when it comes to security against some of like the bigger banks that are out there?
Yeah, that's a good one. So I think for us, because we are a smaller bank, obviously the estate and the infrastructure is, you know, on a different scale than a larger bank as well. The Barclays is actually the bank that moved me to the UK. So I worked for Barclays and got to see and experience, you know, working in a bank environment at the complete opposite end of the scale. And let me tell you, that's just a whole different level of complexity. So I think that for us, it is about having the ability to wrap your arms a bit more tightly around the total estate, but then also working super closely with the board and with the executive team in order to feel like you can drive and get the right understanding about the business and about the priorities and about the criticalities, and you get that level of support. Now, I'm not saying, you know, Barclays, I'm sure they have that as well, for example. I just didn't work in that level of role within Barclays, so that's how my experience kind of relates between the two.
Brilliant. And then the last one from the audience is, what do you think is the best way for you to showcase value to the board for cyber investment? And that's from Paul.
So that's been interesting. And for me, again, this is my first CISO role. So, I mean, I've been dealing with compiling reports and helping my executives previously present to the board. But for me, having that sole ownership, it's been interesting because, again, to go back to an answer I gave previously, I think it depends slightly upon the board that you work for. So I think different boards have different levels of comfort, different levels of capability, knowledge, and appetite for security information. And I think then it boils down to being able to find what is a meaningful way to have that kind of discourse with them. So, for example, I've fed into boards in the past where they did not have a lot of security insight and perhaps clarity or knowledge. And so it's been, in those days, it was more of a series of building blocks, if you will. Whereas the board I work with right now are very security savvy, and you know, they're almost pushing me like, you know, hey, we want more, we expect more in terms of some of the detail and some of the options, you know, that are provided. So that's been fascinating for me, working through that process, and again, for me, growing myself and learning and understanding and seeing that across different types of boards.
Brilliant, thank you.
Excellent, thank you very much. Really insightful questions and also answers there as well. So thank you to everyone that asked a question. And of course, for you, Becky, for giving us your insights on those as well. Now, before we close the day, of course, we'll go back to Kerry, but first I would like to say very special thanks to you, Becky, for joining us today. Really insightful conversation, something that I think that our audience can certainly relate to in terms of that overall cyber app and cyber hygiene, and how to really get that connection between the CISO and also the rest of the organization, and the importance of the security. So really appreciate your tips on how to achieve that kind of best practice. So thank you very much for joining us today, Becky. It's been great to have you.
No, thanks for having me, Stuart. It's been a pleasure.
Welcome. So as I said, just before we wrap things up, we'll turn back over to Kerry for a quick wash up of today's news. Kerry.
Thank you. Computer Weekly features an investigation by Mozilla into video app security. Out of the 15 most populated video apps, 12 met their minimum security standards. In SC Magazine, there's an article from ISC Squared. Half of cybersecurity staff have been taken off security duties to assist with IT-related matters, such as equipping the mobile workforce. However, since remote working took effect, 23% of companies have reported an increase in cyber attacks. And then finally, in ZDNet, they report that New South Wales Cyber Innovation Node has partnered with IBM to help grow digital skills. The partnership will give students and teachers access to online courses.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Kerry. I guess the news today is really showcasing those IT challenges that we're really facing right now in this kind of brave new world that we're in. So needing to switch on so quickly in some instances, those remote working capabilities is no doubt had an impact on the IT and security teams. Also notice that we've got Steve here, which can only mean one thing. You've got something insightful to say about the news as well?
Yeah, that article from SC Magazine I think is interesting, because how often have we heard from security teams when their IT counterparts have implemented something without getting security's input into it, and now they get an opportunity to kind of do that directly, and probably at the most important time when they're starting to open up access that they wouldn't have opened up before. So it can only be seen as a positive thing that the security team are getting involved, and obviously helps them to then think about how they might mitigate additional risks from opening up that access from remote, but also thinking about in the long term, what do they need to do to be able to identify these extra risks they might be facing.
Yeah, I think it's a real opportunity to get kind of a handle on what's going on, and perhaps broader visibility of some of the things that potentially add a huge amount of value to the operational efficiency of a business, but just need to be taken in the rounding and the context of how we also wrap the security piece around that as well. So yeah, I think that's a good point. It's also quite refreshing and good to see that new innovation initiatives are continuing to pop up in the online world as well. Skills gap, clearly well documented challenge worldwide, and perhaps never been more acute than it is now. So the opportunity for students and teachers to take the time that we find ourselves with now to kind of skill up can only be seen as a positive thing. So with that, thank you for your comments there, Steve. Also, very special thanks to today's guest, Becky Pinkard, who's Chief Information Security Officer at Aldermore Bank. Also to everyone here, front of house and behind the scenes at ZeroDaysLive. And of course, to all of you for tuning in. And just a quick reminder, tomorrow, as I said at the top of the show, we're going to be joined by John Banhart of Venable, talking GovSec. So please do join us then. Until then, please do have a good rest of the day. Goodbye.